Working Cows Podcast, episode 153.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. It's Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, fresh back from the Regenerative Grazing Workshop at Cornerstone Grazing, hosted by Derek and Anneliese Schwanebeck, featuring Jim Garish. A really good opportunity to go down there and to take in some of that. Hope to talk a little bit more about that in a future solo episode, some of the things that I kind of gleaned out of that. Good opportunity there, though. Do want to let you know about, on the front end of this episode, that the Colorado section for the Society of Range Management is hosting a conference coming up. It will be a virtual conference over the course of a few days in October 20th, October 22nd, the evening of October 22nd as well, October 27th, and October 29th. Past guests of the Working Cows podcast, like Ryan Noble and Dallas Mount, will be talking about rangeland ranching, the value of peer advisory and strategic decision-making, systems thinking, and an exploration of drought management. Other topics include range science and research. There's a movie night featuring the Hannah Ranch. I'll be leading a post-screening Q&A with Maggie Hanna, as well as the director of the movie, Mitch Dickman, and Colorado Cattlemen's Agricultural Land Trust, Kate Greenberg. And then I'll also be speaking on October 27th with online communities. Kathy Voth will be there. Tip Hudson from the Art of Range podcast will also be there on October 27th from 11 to 12:30. And then also other opportunities to connect. So it's going to be a pretty interesting way of handling it. If you want more information or you want to register, go ahead and get registered at csrm.org/webinars, csrm.org/webinars. So if you're interested in that, there will be a link in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/153. Today, we're talking stacking enterprises with George and Anneliese Walker of Walker Farms near Princeton, Minnesota. I recorded this live in Derek Schwanebeck's office at Cornerstone Grazing near Hyannis, Nebraska. So here is my interview with George and Anneliese Walker of Walker Farms. George, Anneliese, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Thanks for having us, Clay.
Yeah, we're excited. We're excited to be here.
You guys are part of the team that's running Walker Farms in Princeton, Minnesota?
In Minnesota, yep.
And what is that? What do you have going on there? What do you guys have going on at Walker Farms?
Quite a few things. We've got grass-fed beef. We got grass-fed lamb. We have pastured pork. We have pastured layers, pastured broilers, and we do one group of pastured turkeys a year. So basically for the holiday season.
And what are some of the challenges of that, I suppose, managing complexity and some of those things? How do you guys keep that as simple as possible?
I would say the biggest thing is understanding the context that each animal plays within the community that they're participating in. So cows as a ruminant are really great at knocking down the higher forages, and then you run your chickens behind it. They add nitrogen to the soil. It boosts your productivity on the pasture. They're also eating the bugs and the maggots and from those cow patties, helping to distribute that biomass. Pigs themselves are really great at aerating the soil because they are rooting creatures. So understanding what they can bring to an ecosystem, how they fit together, and then getting them to sort of dance and actively participate in the regeneration of our lands.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. What's the history of the utilization of the land base that you guys are on?
Most of the land that we're on was either in row crop for 30 plus years, my lifetime. I grew up there, and most of those fields were row crops my entire lifetime. One of the properties we're on was slated to be a housing development that never happened, so we've brought that back into pasture. So that is a challenge by itself, trying to take something that's a monoculture that has had herbicides that are in the soil and then trying to reclimate that. So we have put down some cover crops in areas. We try not to because that's expensive, but to try to get the diversity for the microbes to start building soil, and it all works hand in hand.
And how long have you been at the model as it currently exists?
Well, I was in Wisconsin for almost 18 years doing over there, and then just about 5 years ago, Lisa and I moved back to the home farm and combined forces with my brother. So that's 5 years that we've been, just about 5 years that we've been doing what we're doing, where we're doing it now.
Sure. Every year we've added another enterprise, essentially. So a little extra layer of complexity.
And you are doing what you're doing now in Wisconsin for all of those 18 years, or for...
Pretty much. Okay. So I want to say I read Omnivore's Dilemma and then, binged Joel Salton stuff. And I grew up farming, but more conventionally. And that was kind of my gateway drug.
Michael Pollan red-pilled you?
Yeah. Yeah. And then I started doing the poultry, and it kind of exploded from there. In Wisconsin, I did a meat CSA, which for me was a pretty good model. I was farrier full time. We had a horse boarding facility and was building this, and that model worked good because then I could decide what was going to be in those boxes. There wasn't as much pick and choose. So some of the harder to sell cuts I could use. Now, where we are now, we do everything. We use Gray's cart, and that's more Annelise's wheelhouse. She sets all that up, but we sell, we do a delivery route every other week to specific areas, and then off weeks we go to other areas. We do some on-farm sales. We've looked into doing the shipping. We are shipping, but with the current state of the COVID, we just haven't pushed that because we've been pretty tight on inventory.
Are you marketing most of those products year round? All of those products year round? Other than the turkeys, you said that was pretty hyper seasonal, I guess. But what season of the year are you marketing the different things that you're growing?
All year round. There's never really a pause. Because our growing season is so short, we try to do the majority, especially our pastured poultry. We try to grow the majority of our inventory during our green season, right? Our green date to green date. And then we carry over inventory. We try to schedule out and sort of budget for what we're going to sell over the winter so that there's, our customers are still getting high quality products that were grown in summer, but they've been frozen. So they can, so it just increases the longevity of what we can do and continue to serve our local customer base.
Yeah.
Even if it's negative, terrible cold.
Yeah. Well, and it's been, right now, last week we brought our last batch of 500 broilers they came onto the farm. We get them a day old. So those will be processed in about 8 weeks. But we've been approached by cafes and restaurants wanting our chicken year round, but they all want fresh chicken. And it's been a challenge to explain to them that the quality difference of that bird, if we butcher it in July versus January, it wouldn't even be the same thing, and we won't risk that. So we'd rather have the inventory and work on moving the frozen product. And
a bird butchered in January is orders of magnitude worse than a bird frozen in July, I'm guessing.
From a nutrient profile to cost of production, all the variables, it wouldn't make sense, really.
So have there been enterprises that you've entertained stacking that you've said, no, that won't work here, or we don't have the market for it, or we don't want to take the time to develop the market for it, anything like that?
Emus.
Yeah, emus, ostriches, alpacas, the fiber market. And they just don't, I'm not a fan. They're just not my jam. I don't know.
Sure.
No, I'm trying to think things we've, our area, the stocker cattle, I mean, I've always looked at that for give you some flexibility, but compared to where we are right now in Nebraska, the number of cattle, it doesn't quite work the same way. We'd almost have to be buying them in. I haven't, and I maybe am not digging deep enough, to find and do custom grazing. I think that would be an enterprise to help us utilize, because we are definitely understocked. We even were figuring, probably 50% understocked right now with our land base. So that, that's that we know we have a place to go,
What have you seen as the benefits? And I don't know if there's any kind of a control that you guys can think of, but what have you seen as the benefits of having the enterprise stacked and rejuvenating that land as far as the speed at which that's happened? What have those benefits been for you guys?
I think the biggest benefit of stacking your enterprises, so if you look at it from like an ecosystem first approach, it's refilling all of those niches where, the ecosystem niches where these different species used to be and perform in. From a business standpoint, it gives you a lot more flexibility in what you can do and a little bit more protection. So if you go through a trend of, eggs are bad for you, that was like the big thing in the 90s. Well, if eggs aren't performing, we have to drop the price, whatever, we still have pork, beef, chicken to carry us. It gives us a resiliency that other, like, I would say monoculture businesses or like single product businesses just really don't have that buffer. So one of the coolest things that we've seen, especially since introducing ruminants, we reintroduced beef into the business model a couple of years ago. And so stacking your poultry and your beef and everything, we're seeing our ecosystems reestablish a lot quicker. So we're looking at bird populations, butterfly populations, bugs, fungi, like all these different things that are really, really important to reestablishing soil health, especially in these places that have been historically, the topsoil has been so destructed by manipulation by humans, human mismanagement.
Well, it's just like the soil, in your pastures, what's been our issue of monoculture. So we want as much polyculture as we can. Well, it works the same with the animals. You've got all those animals going over that same piece of ground, providing different things for different plants and different microbes. And so it's just accelerates the process.
So we're here, by the way, thank you, Derek. I didn't ask you, but we're borrowing your office. We're in Derek Schwanebeck's office here at the Regenerative Grazing Workshop. Jim Garish has been sawing off the top of our heads and dumping in everything he can for the last 2.5 days, and I think I've caught most of it, or some of it, I don't know. Anyways, one of the things he's talked a lot about, and I've noticed this, is he talks about getting the mineral cycle right, the water cycle right, capturing solar energy. And then where the carbon was, when he talks about all of those 4 ecosystem processes, where the carbon was, he introduces biodiversity. And I keep seeing that and wondering if biodiversity is really the key to capturing more carbon, because a monoculture doesn't capture as much carbon as a biodiverse area. And I think that's probably true for plants and animal species. When you've got a biodiversity of plant and animal species on the same land, you're probably able to capture more carbon than just a monoculture of plants harvested by a monoculture of animals.
Well,
go ahead. Has that been your experience, or?
Yeah, and well, just like Jim is talking about, you have the different leaf shapes, so you have the more efficient solar panel.
Sure.
When we walk around in this country, which we're not used to because we have way more rainfall, I look at some of the pastures and I would get scared. But talking with some of the folks here, they're really excited about those, which shows how much diversity we do get. But then ours all dies and gets covered with snow in the wintertime.
Yeah, it goes to sleep.
Yeah. We try not to kill it. But.
Right. Talk about that, about your environment, snowfall, and what is that doing for you? And is there anything, Are there any animals there year round? Are they all harvested into a freezer for sale throughout the year? How's that working at Walker?
So we carry over laying chickens, as well as we have some stocker cattle and our cow-calf herd. And then we also have some breeding sows, so in our pork. Anything, like all of our meat birds are all culled in the freezer by the time the snow flies, well, depending on when it snows in November. But in winter, you do get, so in our area, because we do have such harsh winters, we are required to feed hay. That is something that we budget for. That's something that we plan for. The thing to consider, though, is because a lot of our properties have experienced a lot of topsoil disturbance, we can be incredibly strategic about where we bale graze. So where are these animals depositing their fertilizer, essentially? So what context are they filling, and how can you make the most of your impossible situation? So the area that we had talked about where it was slated for development, a lot of the topsoil had experienced a lot of disturbance, and so during our growing season, we would go out, establish where the bald spots are, and then bale graze in those bald spots. So now there's so much organic matter, and with the birds and the bugs in the growing season, that fungi, bacteria, nematodes, like all these different insects, bugs, birds, and then animals can then reestablish that soil health because it has more to work with. We are in very fragile soils. We're in high sand. It's like blow sand. And so, covering the like biggest thing is just cover it up. Yeah. Just protect it. It doesn't need to see the sun. And so, if you live in an area that is incredibly cold, or you have to feed hay, get strategic about how you feed hay so that you're fertilizing those areas. And then it displaces the cost from your cattle operation to your land. So you can sort of cash crop the next, or like not cash crop, but get more value out of that land next year.
Yeah, you don't want to feed just up by the barn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cattle will go a long way, and then, their water requirement goes down in the wintertime too, so they can move, which we've talked about here quite a bit. So
yeah, Jim Garrett said he doesn't have a problem watching them walk a mile to a half a mile for water in the winter. And
by us, that's a long ways away. We have trees around everything, so it's not like out here where it's open plains. So.
Yep. What is the landscape? I mean, the cows go over it first. Are they the first ones through?
Typically, the cows are going over first. On the home place, we have the bull back there, and we had a couple of call cows there for a little while, and the sheep are going over that. But where we're really working up, and we call it the Thompson Farm, we're running the cows over everything right now. The limiting factor there is water, and it's not that we don't have the water; it's that we don't have the infrastructure. So we're still working. The north side of the farm, we do have water where I can have water and really get my paddocks where I want them. And with the south side of the farm, well, we're actually not back fencing. My brother's doing the moves, and we're just not back fencing because I don't have the water where it needs to be. So that is a challenge anywhere. We're blessed. We have a lot of water. It's just getting it where it needs to be.
Right. Yep. And do you then come in with layers or broilers, or is it something else?
It depends. The layers typically are about 4 days behind the cows. We try to keep them following the cows pretty close. One of our laying mobiles actually doubles as the shade mobile for the cows, the mobile shade. So that kind of goes together. Then we have another laying house that's an old contractor trailer that my brother and I gutted, and that one kind of stays back a little ways. The broilers we've kind of keep on the farm that they're on right now. We know we're some pretty bad. We've done some drone stuff there where we need some nitrogen, and so we're running the broilers over that. So they're kind of staying on that north side for this season. Now, after we look at things this fall, we'll figure what we're going to do next year. We will have more broiler pens next year too, so we'll even have more flexibility. Like I said, we used to run the Soliton style pens. They're great, especially when you're starting out. They're very inexpensive. Now we run a hoop style building with a square tubing frame that my brother builds. I mean, they're very heavy duty. We have to pull them with a small tractor, a WD Alice, and that just That's the way to get the nitrogen where you want it. And
Sure. What are the dimensions of those?
oh boy, he's going to hear this and go, I want to say it's 30 by, it's like 25 by 30. And I might just make that wrong, but he uses square tubing. And so we're putting 250 birds in those per batch. We do our own on-farm processing, and we've found this year that 250 mark for our current situation with we were usually running about 5 people. That's right where we want to be. Maybe even a little tall. We might go back to 200 because we're going to have more pens next year. We might do it as 200 birds. So, because butcher dates get to be, we want to get it done before it gets warm, and we try, we butchered before we came here on last Saturday, and so we had about 248 birds or so to do, 245. We started killing at about 6:45. We were packed up in the house having lunch at 1, which, and about half of those birds get cut up into, boneless, skinless breast, thighs, legs, wings,
On the day when you're butchering?
Yep. So we'll run everything through. Everything will get killed. Anything that's 5 pounds or over goes into a chill tank, a separate chill tank for cut-ups. Anything under that gets bagged immediately, shrink wrapped in the freezer, and then we clean, come back, and then we start cutting up. And then as we're cutting up, we have big trays that we have it all separated in, and Anneliese's on the packing side with my mom, and they're packing as we go along there.
Yep.
So.
And so the chickens are sanitizing the fields, the pastures, adding nitrogen. What else? Anything else that you guys...
if we have any tufts that are thatched grass, chickens, it's their natural way to do a lot of scratching. Yep. And so if we have areas where there's a lot of thatching, ground cover that just needs to be broken up, run some chickens across it. You get your fertilizer, you get your breakup of that organic matter or that top thatching so that it aerates the soil. It allows a little space for some baby plants to come through. It's just a all around really great symbiotic relationship, really.
Do you bring layers or broilers through bale grazed areas
Definitely.
Yep.
And you see those bale grazed areas that have had a chicken across them come back faster? Because I know that's sometimes the concern. You got dead spots where you've bale grazed, or spots where the life really hasn't jumped back yet. But I mean, everybody I think understands it's coming. Yeah. But maybe you get more use out of it year one than you might have if you didn't have a chicken camped out there for a little bit.
We definitely do that. This year two, we planted in. There were some turnips and a couple some oats and stuff that we no-tilled right through the bale grazing section of last year, and that turned out really nice. And then ran the chickens over it. And the chickens don't destroy that at all because those plants are still there, but they really opened that up. And it's, we're probably going to stay off of it this year. I'm going to just leave that green material there. But if you were in a pinch, you probably could go back and graze that yet this fall. I think safely.
So Gabe Brown, in his book Dirt to Soil, has a chapter called "Every Ranch Needs Some Sheep." Do you think that every ranch needs some pastured poultry too, or is that not? I mean, because the marketing side of it, is that maybe not worth it? But I don't know. I'm just wondering what you guys. What's your perspective?
Well, I can tell you right offhand, without really looking at the numbers, that pastured poultry is our best margin, followed by hogs and eggs. Yeah,
and that's that's I think Gabe says in his book that cows are the lowest margin critter generally on their place, and he said if you want to talk about labor, dollars, effort, land used, he said bees are the highest for us.
That's funny because you asked before about the enterprises. Well, my dad, he's kind of our bee guy. This year it didn't work out, but he made a bunch of bee traps to try to catch wild swarms that they're mostly domestic swarms that have left. And we didn't have any luck this year, but he's all set up for that. Next year we're hoping to, one of these times we'll get get a swarm and start doing some honey. And that was brought on. My brother found some of the information, but also was egged on a little bit by Gabe because he was telling us how his honey system works. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. And when we get the store going up, that's going to be something we're going to want there.
Well, and encouraging the pollinators to come back is super important, especially for our stuff. Prairie grasses need pollinators. All grasses need pollinators. I think that was my big aha this winter, was like, oh my gosh, grass needs to be pollinated. Like, I didn't make that connection before. But from a business standpoint, it is, chickens and poultry are a higher profit margin for the producer, but it's also, if you have fragile soils that do need the nitrogen, you can focus those birds on the area that needs that extra loving. So, it's always a twofold answer. Is it a business choice? Is it an ecosystem choice? And it's one and the same. If you're looking at boosting your productivity, it may be a good thing, even if you're only raising 50 birds for your own consumption, that you butcher on farm or you hire someone to do it for you, you're putting protein on your plate, but you're also adding fertilizer to your soils.
Right.
So, it's an ecosystems approach to farming, right? So
you're cycling the nutrients.
Yeah.
Cycling nutrients.
Cycling nutrients.
Yeah. Is there anything that you think the typical rancher running just cows, anything that they should be looking to the people in your space to learn from you guys?
Well, I think it's stacking enterprises. And as we've learned here, maybe poultry is kind of a far stretch in this country, and when I mean that being in Nebraska here, but why not, when you've said before, why not sheep? Why not goats maybe is the thing. I think chickens could still be viable. You're going to have your infrastructure where it needs to be to, you have different predator pressure maybe than we do.
Think about your stocking density. If you're only going to move once a day, understanding how those chickens are using that pasture so you don't have too much disturbance or you don't burn your plants too, just because the plant density here is quite significantly smaller than where we're from. But and
chickens and poultry in general, but chickens will burn a pasture too if you're not moving them. Mm-hmm. We've had times in drier times when instead of moving once a day, we'll move twice a day, just because we notice, we're getting a little bit hot there, and we don't need that much, because it takes so much more time to recover from that. We're toying with some ideas of putting cover crops in right behind them. It's trying to figure out the logistics of that. Just to get something to jump out of the soil right away, because you can make it pretty bare if you're not careful. So
sure. So they are harvesting some forage out of that.
Well, they eat a lot. When we butcher and you open up a gizzard, you see how much grass that they're consuming. It's amazing. Yeah,
I was telling you guys about a turkey I shot this fall or this spring. I mean, he was just full of alfalfa. It was crazy. I couldn't believe you could stuff that much down in there.
They're a huge fan of legumes.
Turkeys are far better grazers actually than chickens.
Right.
And they're, in my opinion, quite a bit more entertaining.
And they come when called. You can train turkeys.
Extent,
yeah, you can train turkeys, which sounds weird, but you can.
What about on the marketing side? Anything that ranchers should be looking to people in your space to learn? I think of, we had a conversation at lunch today about the way you're going to add value to some cull cows that probably aren't even going to be good burger. Things like that. Maybe they're not going to make snack sticks out of a cull cow, but the way that you guys think about marketing, I think we talked a lot about that today before lunch. In the sessions, that marketing is a big part of success in ranching profitability.
Yeah. So marketing has, in my experience, two different meanings. So finding a market, and then the actual, how do you talk about your product? So in direct to consumer marketing, they are buying your mission and your successes as much as they are buying your product. I would say, if you're not getting the value that you need or want out of the product that you're producing, be it, grass-fed beef or whatever, don't be afraid to piddle in other sectors, or try to experiment with doing it differently. I think the biggest thing that I have learned is that people want to eat meat. They just want to eat it in a respectful and mindful way. And overall, so I've heard a lot of farmers say, oh, consumers just don't understand. Well, have you talked to one? Have you told your story? If they don't like your story, maybe you should think about how you're producing. Right. If it's not jiving, if you can't, expect people to buy a product that they don't believe in, period. And so on the flip side of that conversation, where we're at, how I've seen it is people want to celebrate your successes. They want to be a part of your journey. They want to be a part of that growth and that experience and that, I had a post about like a frog, and I was like, this is so cool. I am seeing frogs in my pasture, and there previously had been none, because we're finally reestablishing that ecosystem. We're reestablishing our pastures, and we're regenerating. We're achieving this thing, and I'm so excited about it. And we had a really great response from people who follow our farm on social media. And, a lot of, farms that I've talked to, they're like, oh, social media is, it's the worst. And yes, it's like the hungriest toddler monster you've ever had in your life. But it's a place to have conversations. It's a place to tell your story. It's not necessarily a place to sell your product. It's understanding the context of the tool. You are not going to use a fork to till your garden. I mean, I wouldn't recommend tilling your garden, but you have to use the tool for the job that it was intended for. And social media is a place to have conversations, to build relationships, to reach new audiences, to tell your story and why it matters and why they matter in the context of your story. We could not farm the way that we farm without our customer base. And our customer base, and I've lovingly called them our farm family. I mean, we have people who come to us that have had autoimmune disorders. I mean, I myself have an autoimmune disorder and have been able to heal my body through food. And so having customers that have similar experiences, that is so rewarding. And I cannot imagine how hard it would be to be a farmer that has a product that is not well received by the public. That would break my heart. Yeah. Because you work so hard to put that love and work into that product, and then it, to have, to I don't know, just be degraded. We need to reconnect farmers with the populations they feed. And then farmers need to be open to hearing no. And sort of questioning their paradigms. Yeah.
And the episode that I just released here on Tuesday with Jason Mock, I said, and I've said it before, ranchers are the only ones who tell the market what they want rather than waiting for the market to tell them what they want. By and large, we're going to produce commodity beef and you're going to buy it and we want this price for it, rather than the market saying, no, we want this kind of beef, or we want chicken, or we want pork, or we want whatever. And so I think that's a really good point. And we're inching up against the start of our next session here. But I do think one question that I don't want to leave on the table is there anything that ranchers managing large landscapes can do to serve your industry, the people managing landscapes the way you guys are? Is what can we provide? Can we provide you land for chickens? Can we provide you with quality beef that finishes easy on grass? Some of those things. What are some of the needs that maybe we could meet?
All of the above there, but you bring up a great point there. Maybe that's not your thing, doing the chickens, keeps you up at night. We need to get more young people, not just young people, people in general on the landscape. That's one thing that saddens me quite a bit, is we're losing people on the land, and we lose our umbilical to the land because of that. Well, here's an opportunity for a young person to start an enterprise and team up with you, because it's not going to take away from your current operation. And then, I would argue that it will add to it. So that would be one thing. Be open to teaming up with somebody, so you don't have to do it all.
And I'm 35 miles from a gas station, 85 miles from a Walmart, and I always think, what I would love is for some enterprising young individual to bring me the chickens. I'll move the tractors every day. I'll help you butcher them, and then we can split the profits however we both agree to it. Something like that is what I'd love. I'd love to do that because I do see the value of more species. The more species we can get on the land at the right time for the right reasons, is going to be a net positive. So we're real close to this, but I cannot let you guys go without giving you an opportunity to share whatever you want to share. Make sure I didn't leave anything major on the table. I know this could have been hours long, but never enough time. But share what you guys want to share as far as links or places people can find you. We didn't even mention the store that you guys had a COVID soft launch of.
Yeah. No, well, I'll at least talk about quick the website and all that.
Yeah, I mean, so, gosh, we sell everything online, and so that could probably even be an episode in and of itself, like how to build your infrastructure. Your physical infrastructure is just as important as the internet infrastructure that you build. Well, if you want to learn more about Walker Farms, if you have any questions, you can always find us online, walkerfarmsmn.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. If you have any questions, shoot an email out to us. Give us a call. We're always happy to answer questions. And insofar as like looking at resources, if you're nervous about introducing some of these other enterprises and stuff like that, let us know. We'd be more than happy to talk to you about our infrastructure and how we've set it up. There's other producers that are like us in this world. Most people are pretty open to having discussions about those things.
I think it's like podcasting. Everybody recognizes we need more people on the land, more egg podcasts, especially regenerative egg podcasts, not fewer. So it kind of goes back to that.
No, it's starting to get into education. I think it's the most dangerous thing is it would be to have the arrival syndrome. I mean, why are we here in Nebraska? We're 10 and a half, almost 11 hours away from home. Why? Because we want to educate ourselves. Do we know some of these things? Yeah, we do. Do we know them in this context? Sometimes not. And then to add to that, just meeting the people. I always put more weight on the networking that's been had because I've been through the Soil Health Academy and the networking there, and I know the networking here will be similar. I mean, that's just invaluable. Yeah. I mean, you have the continuing education.
Yep, very good. And I'd love to do it again sometime. Hopefully we'll cross paths again and do another live one. But thank you guys for your time. George and Anneliese, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Clay, for everything you're doing. This is great.
Really appreciate that opportunity. Good stuff. Be sure to check out, as I said, the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/153 for links to all of those things. Also links to the Colorado section of the Society for Range Management, their Common Ground free webinar series, but you got to register at cssrm.org. A link to that as well as the flyer will be up at the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/153. Really excited next week to talk about the 4 laws of ecology with Jim Garish on episode 154 of the Working Cows podcast, coming your way real soon.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.